Here now, Washington Times national security correspondent Bill Gerst and the author of Deceiving the Sky Inside Communist China's Drive for Global Supremacy. It's great to have you with us today. And let me begin by asking you if you think that the president's statement yesterday regarding this issue was sufficient enough. He's saying that the other objects that came down were not necessarily tied to China. They were private balloons, but he's not telling the American people whose balloons they were. Still a lot of questions about that. I find it difficult to believe that the administration, the government don't know whose balloons they were. What do you think?
Well, clearly they shot down these three objects mistakenly, spent a lot of money doing it without really finding out what they were and destroying them, so that we still don't know. I think the intelligence community and the Pentagon don't know what they were. But I think what happened by shooting those objects down and now identifying them as not related to the spy balloon, they've given the Chinese a great propaganda victory, because China has been claiming that the spy balloon, which was clearly linked to the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, was a weather balloon and was blown off course, when in fact it was maneuvered across the United States and looked at some sensitive sites like our missile base in Montana.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because President Biden did make a statement to NBC, and he said this: I think the last thing that she wants to do is fundamentally rip the relationship with the United States and with me. That may be how he sees it. I think other people doubt that.
Yeah, Xi Jinping has proposed the China Dream, which is basically an idea where China takes over the world. And basically, in order to do that, China has to diminish and weaken the United States. And that's been a process that's been going on. The military calls it gray zone warfare. It involves financial, political, intelligence warfare against the United States. The U.S. has been slow to recognize that. We need to recognize that and take action to stop it.
It was interesting. I read a note this morning from HSBC saying that when we think about our economic ties to China, a lot of the response has been to try to onshore or maybe near shore. Nearshoring has also been spurred on by the need to create jobs in the U.S. You have both major political parties have championed this idea. Chinese companies, in turn, in an effort to avoid some of the Trump-era tariffs, they've been moving supply chain logistics and investing heavily in Mexico in the past few years. That's from HSBC. I'm curious how you think about our economic ties, if nearshoring and moving some of these supply chains is at least a first step in taking back some of the control of our supply chains?
Yeah, it's a first step, but it's not enough. The big debate now is called decoupling from China. And the business community is divided. Some businesses want to continue making money in China. Others are saying, look, it's not worth the risk. We're dealing with a genocidal regime that's engaged in genocide in Xinjiang. It's building up its nuclear forces. So I think the debate is whether or not to decouple. I'm in favor of decoupling. I think that any engagement with China at this point is bolstering their military forces. And if you look at their military writings, they've made clear that they have one enemy, and it's the United States.
Bill, I want to go to a related subject here. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is blasting President Biden for allowing the deadly flood of fentanyl to cross our southern border. Listen to this.
Today, more than 300 Americans will be poisoned and died from fentanyl. You're looking at a place that much of it comes through. Tomorrow, there'll be 300 more. That's the equivalent of an airline crashing. If an airline crashed in America every single day, by the third day, the entire nation would wake up and say we need to fix the problem.
So far this year, Border Patrol agents have seized enough fentanyl to kill 100 million Americans in under 5 months. Bill, everybody knows the source of this is China, okay? Is there anything happening with this administration in China to stem where this is starting from? Or is China saying, we're not playing ball and we're not even listening to you, Biden administration?
Yeah, what happened? This is a huge crisis, the fentanyl crisis. And during the Trump administration, there was pressure on China, even though they didn't have evidence that the Chinese government was directly behind the fentanyl and the precursor chemicals. So what happened was China was sending this incredibly deadly drug through the mail and through couriers because it's so potent you could put it in small packages. Well, after the pressure from the Trump administration, China shifted, and they started working with the Mexican cartels and flowing fentanyl through Mexico into the United States. So not enough has been done. As you mentioned, hundreds of thousands of Americans are dying. It's a crisis, and it doesn't seem to be getting the priority that it should. The Chinese could shut it off, and they showed that they could during the Trump administration if pressure was put on it. But the Biden administration is more interested in doing some type of a climate deal with China, and they're offering some kind of a neo-appeasement policy, which is a kind of a retrenchment from the harder line policies during the Trump administration.
So what I hear you saying is China could do an awful lot. They're doing absolutely nothing and dismissing whatever it is the Biden administration may be asking of them. That's a scary thought. Bill, we appreciate your perspective on this. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.